Hello and welcome to another fully quarantined episode of Saved by the 90s. My name's Adam Patterson. With me today is a guy who always prefers the remakes to the originals, Mr. Ken Bakley. Hey, Ken.
Hello, I always learn so much about myself in these introductions.
A lot of people complain about Hollywood's current predilection for remakes, reboots, and adaptations, but the 90s saw more than its fair share of these.
This month we'll be focusing on 4 TV series adaptations released in May throughout the decade. So grab a bowl of popcorn and prepare to stare into what was once called the vast wasteland. This is Saved by the 90s.
Zay, you're out for a beer.
What do you have?
Beer. What if there wasn't any beer?
Sorry, guys. Never heard of it.
Oh, Zima. Zima's good.
There you go.
What is this? No, Zima's a unique alcohol beverage. I kind of like it.
Anything else?
You got pretzels? What day is this?
Our first title this month is an adaptation of a popular anthology horror series created by George Romero, which ran for 4 seasons between 1983 and 1988. Directed by John Harrison and released on May 4th, 1990, this is Tales from the Darkside, the movie.
From Stephen King, originator of Pet Sematary. Michael McDowell, creator of Beetlejuice. And George Romero, director of Night of the Living Dead. Comes 4 tales of horror.
Don't make light of it.
Tales from the Darkside. The movie, rated R. Starts Friday, May 4th at theaters everywhere.
A young boy tells 3 horror stories to distract a witch who plans to eat him. Adam, start us off. What did you think of Tales from the Darkside, the movie?
Tales from the Darkside, the movie. Now, I never saw this before. This is the first time I've seen this. I remember I liked the show a lot as a kid. I think I saw it on syndication at some point because I remember really enjoying the show, but I was a big fan of all of these anthology series. I loved Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt was like my jam. I was obsessed with that show. So I don't know why, but for some reason this movie has always eluded me, and you know, watching it now, it's not great, and
No.
It's sort of like a poor man's Tales from the Crypt, or like a really poor man's Twilight Zone. Sort of in that vein. The interesting thing is, like, with the Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt, there's always like a moral to the story. You know, you watch these little, they're almost like little parables, and there's some kind of moral, there's some kind of message with each of the stories. That's not really the case with Tales from the Darkside. It is what it is.
Yeah, like a couple things immediately sprung to mind. First, I mean, you obviously have to tie it in with the franchise, but there's no real reason for this to be called Tales from the Darkside in relation to a TV show, because if it's an anthology, then it could just be any anthology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to my knowledge, there's no real signature that makes these feel like anything in particular. Like, these are 3 segments that basically all feel like a mid-tier segment from a different anthology.
Yeah, I mean, these could have been, and maybe they were. I don't know what the details are with the production of this movie, but it feels like these are just TV episode segments. There's certainly more blood and nudity and whatnot in these, but even especially the nudity feels completely tacked on. Like, they were just like, oh, this is a movie, we can get away with this because it's a movie now. And so all of that felt just completely extraneous. I thought that the segments were stupid, but I had fun with some of them. I thought some of them were funny. I don't know which one I would say is my favorite. I felt like they were all rushed. Like every one of them felt really half-baked to me. Like either they just sped through the whole story. I mean, I know that they were pressed for time, they were trying to squeeze in 3 of these stories and then the wraparound, but everything felt so truncated and completely like not developed enough.
This is a case for, people always talk about, liking a fast-paced movie because they feel like it breezes by. That is not always a good thing. Like, this is one of those movies where they all feel so rushed that you're like, almost at the end of the 3rd segment, you're like, this movie is almost over. It does not make sense for it to almost be over.
Yeah, it's not great. The funny thing is, so the movie opens with Debbie Harry in what looks to be a Jeep Cherokee commercial. This opening sequence, like during the opening credits, it's so funny because it's just her driving. It's her driving, like sensuous driving in this Jeep Cherokee in her little suburban neighborhood, and then we discover that she gets home and she seems like this, perfect suburban housewife or whatever, and it turns out that she's keeping Joey Lawrence's little brother trapped in a dungeon and plans to eat him. Which, so that's the wraparound. Then the first segment is with, and I don't know, I was gonna say my initial thoughts were maybe that was my favorite one, but looking back, I don't know if I have a favorite per se. But anyway, the first segment involves a mummy. You don't see too many mummy stories these days, but it features Christian Slater as this college dude, and then you also have Steve Buscemi as a college dude, which is
in a magnetic performance.
Which is so Buscemi plays this guy who is kind of obsessed with like ancient artifacts and stuff, and he buys a mummy somehow. He tomb and everything. It's got the sarcophagus and everything, and it gets delivered to him.
Yeah,
like where
he's clearly in some kind of bizarre 10-year graduate program.
Where do you buy a mummy? Like he just bought it. It was called lot something, and
249.
Lot 249. So he must have got it at an auction, but where does a grad student have
how
the
auctions
money?
Go.
Oh yeah,
it's the Jasper Johns followed by the Mummy.
It's like an old Atari 2600 collection, and then the sarcophagus with the fully preserved mummy in it. Lot 249.
And then like the Warhol soup cans after that.
Yeah, and then like an old Crown Victoria, retired Crown Victoria.
Exactly. This is exactly what auctions are. All auctions are the same. They just sell all different things.
So you have Buscemi who gets this mummy, and he finds this magical spell inside of it that is able to he's able to reanimate the mummy and bring it back to life, and he has it kill Christian Slater's best friend and sister. And so first of all, the sister's played by Julianne Moore, and when the best friend gets killed, now she's dating the best friend, she doesn't seem to care at all that he's dead. In fact, neither of them do. They both seem very nonchalant about the fact that this guy got murdered. And then when
they don't really,
then when Julianne Moore gets murdered, Christian Slater is like, yeah, you killed my sister. Like,
yeah, he goes after, he thinks it's Buscemi and goes after Buscemi, not out of a sense of, extraordinary anger and grief and shock, but just in the sense of, well, I guess it would be rude not to.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, so he's the one who finds her dead body, and the mummy, I guess, tries to mummify her too, so it's a pretty gruesome scene. And the very next scene, you see Christian Slater on the phone. He's in his dorm room, and he's on the phone with his parents, and he's like, I'll come home after finals. And it's like, dude, your sister was just brutally murdered by a mummy. And he knew it was a mummy too. He knew. He caught on really quickly that it was a mummy. So
in much that I imagine that this movie, in the universe of this story, auctions are just regular auctions with regular omnibus auctions with mummies thrown in. This movie also does not understand how people react to anything.
No, absolutely not. And then, so what you end up seeing is Christian Slater goes after Buscemi and destroys the mummy, and then he thinks that he destroys the spell, but twist, Buscemi gave him the wrong thing, so that's how they leave that. Then you have the cat. The cat was the second one, right? I think.
Yes.
Cat from Hell, which
based on the Stephen King story,
which involves Buster Poindexter as a hitman who is hired to kill a cat, but the cat is like evil. So there's that one.
So much of the casting in this feels like, Mad Libs.
Yeah, it is. It's got some crazy casting. The Cat from Hell I thought was fine. I liked the end when the cat, the way that the cat kills him at the end. I thought it was just like, this is how you choose to kill this man. This is how you choose to kill him. Okay, I'm gonna go with it.
Felt like the cat was kind of phoning it in almost.
I did like most of the effects work in this movie. I thought most of the effects work was pretty fun.
Yeah, I guess at the end you're like, yeah, I guess that's what that would look like if it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. And then the final segment was called Lover's Vow, which involved James Remar, who it's about a gargoyle. It's a gargoyle story where James Remar gets he witnesses a gargoyle killing someone, and then the gargoyle's like, promise you won't tell anybody, and he's like, all right. And then he meets a woman and falls in love, and then it zooms ahead 20 years or something.
Yeah, the time scale on this is crazy.
Yeah, it zooms ahead 20 years, and he tells her, and it turns out, big surprise, she's the gargoyle, and she kills him. And also their children are both gargoyles.
Their children are gargoyles.
Gargoyle children.
Gargoyle-ness is inherited. It's passed down.
So overall, I would say it's very campy. There's a lot of, if you're into sort of cheesy, it came out in 90, but it still feels 80s. It still has a bit of an 80s vibe to it. So if you're looking for something like that, maybe it's worth a look, or if for some reason you are really into the show and haven't seen the movie.
I'm now just seeing on the Wikipedia page for this movie the line, Carola flies away with her gargoyle children. I don't know why the wording of that is so funny to me.
I wrote a note here that says the sex scene with 2 question marks, and I think that I was referring to the James Remar sex scene and found it to be baffling.
Oh yeah, there's so many strange decisions made in this movie.
I mean, I like the fact that they got Debbie Harry to be in it as this sort of witch lady. I thought she was really good in this. She was just hamming it up, and I liked that. That's pretty much it. That's all I have to say about Tales from the Dark Side. I think that even the Tales from the Crypt, there were 2 Tales from the Crypt movies. There was Bordello of Blood and what was the other one called? Demon Knight, I believe. Even both of those are kind of better than this. They weren't anthologies, but
I kind of support, now I'm thinking about it, I do support the gargoyle children because, they didn't know about any of this. And imagine one day you find out you're actually a gargoyle.
Well, yeah, that was the funny thing is
yeah, the kids didn't know.
They didn't know. They just imagine what you're in bed. You're in a beautiful slumber.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you hear your dad being murdered. You wake up and all of a sudden, bam, you're a gargoyle.
And then you have to fly away with your mother, who is also a gargoyle, to take your place as a gargoyle.
And then
in stone.
Yeah, turn yourself into stone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad because you didn't know that was coming.
Nope. It was a normal day for you. You're
Yeah,
out.
you were.
You're in the backyard. You're playing stickball.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a normal day, and all of a sudden, gargoyle time.
Next up, we have a live-action adaptation of one of the most beloved animated TV shows of all time. Released on May 27th, 1994, and directed by Brian Levant, this is The Flintstones.
Once upon a time, dinosaurs lived in houses. Stone Age kids had a ball. And Bedrock was the place to be. This summer,
This job stinks.
Yabba Dabba Do It with The Flintstones. Rated PG. Yabba Dabba Do It this Friday.
Yabba dabba do it. I like how he says it twice. As if we didn't pick up on it the first time. Let's yabba dabba do it again.
Just to make sure.
Oh God.
Just to make sure.
Modern Stone Age family, the Flintstones, hit the big screen in this live-action version of the classic cartoon. Fred helps Barney adopt a child. Barney sees an opportunity to repay him when Slate Mining tests its employees to find a new executive, but no good deed goes unpunished. Ken, what were your initial impressions of the Flintstones?
This movie, we talk a lot on this podcast about seeing movies that seem to encapsulate a very specific moment in Hollywood, like to the point where it feels like a matter of months. Like if this production did not come together the exact time it did, it wouldn't have been made a few months earlier in either direction. This is one of those for 1994.
Oh yeah, big time.
Just the not only the desire to adapt a property of the specific age it would have been around the time of around 30 years when you have that, theory of the 30-year cycle in pop culture, but also the specific tone that it takes. I don't know. Like there's just this extraordinarily mid-90s, almost cynical, almost sincere approach to it that just kind of splits down the middle and doesn't go anywhere.
And I think also it marks a very specific time in technology too, where you have
definitely
there are beginnings of sort of the CG revolution in this, but it is still like 99% practical effects, where you have a lot of puppets and a lot of people in suits and stuff like that, and practical sets and all of that. And I think a really great example, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, is comparing this to the sequel that came out 6 years later, and seeing how those two compare on a technology level. And I gotta say, like, okay, first of all, I loved this movie when I was a kid. Freaking loved it. I saw it at the drive-in. I had like a Flintstones, the movie, like a pin, like a promotional pin for it. I think I still have it, actually. But yeah, I really, really loved this movie. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, probably. And, going back to revisit it now, it's definitely one of those movies where you have, when you watch it as an adult, all of your fond memories just get completely crushed into little bits, into dust, because this movie is so awful. It's not. No, I take that back. It's not awful, but it's
not awful.
It's not great, and maybe that's because it's really aimed at children, I think. But I looking at it, like, I still think that the production design, like all of the minutia of this world, I think is still really well done. Like, I can't imagine. Can you imagine how much styrofoam must have been used to create this movie? I mean,
just unbelievable.
Like, I wonder how many years this movie took off of the Earth's lifespan, because I bet it was like I don't know, like 5 years. Like the Flintstones shortened the lifespan of Earth by like 5 years because of all the styrofoam it used.
It's like 3 or 4 month shoot had like definitively brought the environmental apocalypse on earlier.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, but I really do love all the sets and all of the vehicles and the gadgets and all of the animatronic dinosaurs and the little, how they use little creatures for pretty much everything.
I kind of do like that, yeah.
Just like the cartoon. I mean, I think that they did the best they could to adapt this animated show into live action. Now, do I think it could be better if they did it with today's technology? Honestly, I don't know. I really don't know, because if you think about how they would make it today, it would probably be, like Avatar or something. It would just be entirely done on green screen, and I don't know if it would have that same sort of kitschy flavor to it. This is also a really campy movie. That's very intentionally campy. You have like the B-52s in this movie too, which is like, I mean, they just revel in camp. But
oh yeah,
you also have almost nonstop puns, like, and the puns are really awful, and they're just rapid firing these puns at you, and it's just so bad.
It would arguably be a less enjoyable movie if they were good puns.
Good point. Yeah. Good point. Just remove all the puns. Get rid of all the puns, because I mean, having one or two in a movie like this is fine, but when you're just, I mean, it opens like the movie opens. It's Universal. Like
yes!
they changed the Universal logo. So it opens with a pun, and it just never stops. It's an exhausting movie in a lot of ways.
There's so much happening. Yeah, and there's so much happening, but also you can't remember most of it the second it's over. Like, there's so much happening and none of it stands out.
Yeah, I wish I took more notes on this. I mean, I did enjoy the cast. I think that John Goodman as Fred that's a good casting choice. Same with Elizabeth Perkins as Wilma, and you have Rick Moranis as Barney, and then Rosie O'Donnell as Betty. And I thought that the core cast they were fine. I thought that they were all fine. And then Kyle MacLachlan as Cliff Vandercave,
who's having a lot of fun here.
Oh yeah. He plays a really great villain in this. So
I do defend his performance. I liked his performance in this.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he's good. You have Halle Berry in there as Miss Stone, who's like the sexy secretary, in a role that I doubt we would ever see on screen today anymore. No. Where she's like the hot secretary that's like using her feminine wiles to trick Fred.
No, that would not age well.
And then you have Elizabeth Taylor as Wilma's mom, Pearl Slaghoople.
As people never fail to mention when talking about this movie, this is Elizabeth Taylor's final theatrical credit.
And I thought she was great in it. I mean, she.
Oh yeah, no. I think it's a pretty good.
I mean, yeah, it's like Raul Julia being in Street Fighter as his last.
Yes,
credit,
she is having a great time.
She's just chewing the scenery in this movie, and that's.
And I support that.
Same. Overall, I think that kids will probably really like this movie. Revisiting it as an adult, I find it to be really grating. Despite the still appreciating the visuals and the creativity they use to bring this world to life. No. Grating.
I think my two favorite things that happen in this movie come at the very start, at the very end. One, I actually liked the universe shell. And two, the final title card of the movie before it goes to the credits is a joke where they say they thank the people of Bedrock and the Bedrock Film Commission for their participation in the making of this film, which for some reason made me laugh. Just this stupid like throwaway industry joke.
I appreciated at the end of the movie that the way the show ends when they're like throwing the cat out and all of that stuff. Like, that's fine. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of little winks and nods to the show in there, and I thought that was fun. Now, I did watch the sequel, The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, and this one is, oh my gosh. If you think that the first one is bad in any way, you need to see the second one to truly know how bad a live action Flintstones movie can get. Interestingly, the sequel was released in theaters. It wasn't straight to video. I remember when it came out in 2000, I was shocked that it made it to theaters. It is directed by Brian Levant, so it's the same director. Now, the cast is entirely different. Not a single person comes back.
I'm looking at it right now.
Except, here's an interesting little tidbit. So, Rosie O'Donnell was Betty in the first one, and she's in this movie, but she literally plays an octopus. She plays an octopus masseuse. She does the voice for an octopus masseuse. So it's like they brought her back to do that one voice for like, she has one line.
Well, this was kind of like the time where she was like doing her like talk show, I think.
Probably. Yeah.
So I can't imagine like her schedule probably lined up very well, but also they just brought her back just for the one voice cameo, which seems very strange to me.
Yeah, well, the movie it is a prequel, but when you look at the cast, it's not like they're a lot younger. It's not like they're teenagers or anything like that. You have Mark Addy playing Fred Flintstone. Now, Mark Addy, if you're familiar with his work, he's a really great actor. I think he's pretty great. He was in The Full Monty and A Knight's Tale, and he was in Game of Thrones. He was Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. And but the problem with him is, like, in this movie at least, he could not hide his accent. So Fred Flintstone has this like slight British twang to him. And also, like, I think that maybe one of the reasons that this movie failed, other than the script being pretty awful, is just that with a completely different cast, and you have this guy who at the time was pretty much a no-name, filling the shoes of John Goodman, who was very well known by that point.
Yes.
And then you have Stephen Baldwin taking the place of Rick Moranis. That's never gonna work. Like, how can you possibly replace Rick Moranis with Stephen Baldwin? Although I will say that he does the Barney Rubble laugh like really good in this. Kristen Johnston plays Wilma. You'll probably remember her from Third Rock from the Sun. And then Jane Krakowski plays Betty. Now Jane Krakowski as Betty, I think, is a better fit than Rosie O'Donnell was. She does a really excellent job. Joan Collins plays Wilma's mom in this one.
I'm now like reading this cast as you're reading it. It's not like, it's such a strange. It's so strange to just recast every role.
Yeah. Interestingly, there is one role that I saw that was a carryover from the first one, and it was the guy, I don't even know his name. He's a character actor and he's in tons of stuff, but he was one of the guys who played one of Fred and Barney's co-workers at the quarry. The guys that kind of look like more like cavemen, like the kind of buffoonish Neanderthal type guys. One of those guys was in this one as well. And that was the only carryover that I noticed. You have Alan Cumming playing two roles in this movie. One is Gazoo, which is an alien creature that, now I'm not super familiar with the Flintstones TV series, but I know that in the later seasons they introduced Gazoo, who was this
I
alien.
did know that, but there's some reason towards the end of the Flintstones there is an alien.
Yeah, there is, and he calls him Dum Dum, which I like. Alan Cumming plays that character in this, and I implore everyone to just look up a random scene or even a still image to see what this character looks like, because it is so ridiculous.
My.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect while I was typing that into Google, but whatever I didn't know what to expect, it certainly wasn't this.
He also plays Mick Jagged, which is like this Mick Jagger type character. So Alan Cumming in two roles in this movie. They don't actually get to Rock Vegas until 45 minutes into the movie. So you don't actually see Rock Vegas until halfway through.
I hope it's like a movie where they don't put up the title card until they're at Rock Vegas, like it's a Zha K movie or something.
Unfortunately, that's not how it works. The way that it works,
that actually would have been cool if they did that.
The way that they introduce it actually is they have the Universal logo thing, and they
well, I'm glad they still have that.
And they pull the camera back, and it's Gazoo's like spaceship, and he's in the spaceship with all the other aliens, and he goes like, "Did you just see those letters circling that globe?" And that's how they introduce it. The movie is absolutely atrocious. The technology that I was talking about before, they replaced a lot of the puppet work and like animatronic work in this with CG, and of course it's like it's year
2000 CG.
Year 2000 CG on a movie that probably didn't have a very big budget anyway, and most of that budget probably went to like the sets and stuff. So it's very bad. And I'll finally mention that there is a montage that involves the New Radicals song in it, which I think is like a late 90s hallmark, is to play that New Radicals song, especially when you hear it. And then when you hear it in a Flintstones movie, it fits exactly how you would expect it to fit. New Radicals. I think that's like the 5th time I've mentioned them on this show.
Hanson, the sales report was a disaster. Your group has the lowest performance record in the history of the company, and you're a total disappointment. Are you familiar with the term downsizing?
From the summer hit Flipper come the incredible Flipper Squirt Toys, only at Pizza Hut. Scar and Flipper are just $1.69 each with any pizza purchase. You can even get them delivered. Everyone will love them. Even kids. Sorry. Pizza Hut, you'll love the stuff we're made of.
I love listening.
Okay, then.
I love listening to that commercial completely out of context.
I didn't know what was going on.
What it was
I thought that was for a second, I almost thought that was your covert way of like throwing me off the podcast.
What it was a Pizza Hut commercial, and that guy says,
"Oh, you know how Pizza Hut commercials are."
Oh yeah. When he mentions downsizing, the guy pulls out the flipper squirter thing and squirts his boss in the face.
As one does.
Another TV adaptation released in May was Flipper, but it's more of a remake of the 1963 film than the show. So we thought we'd instead take a look at the 1995 TV series Flipper: The New Adventures.
The show premiered on October 2nd, 1995, and ran for 87 episodes, which made up 4 seasons through July of 2000. So we watched the first 2 episodes of Flipper: The New Adventures for this podcast. 2 45-minute episodes. I feel like the first thing we need to think about is whatever the decision process was for someone to sit down and go, for the Flipper extended universe to really feel like we can continue the Flipper franchise, we need 45 minutes plus commercials every week to really tell the story.
I think what you meant to say was 2 6-hour-long episodes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh my God. Oh,
yes,
Lord.
If you were wondering if Flipper: The New Adventures justifies its hour-long runtime, the answer is what you think the answer to that question is.
I mean, just looking at Flipper, now I was never a fan of Flipper. I remember they would play the old Flipper, the 60s one, on TV after school some days. I remember like going to my babysitter's house and catching episodes of Flipper, and I just hated it. Like I was just ready for it to be over, and I wanted like Darkwing Duck to come on or something. And so I was never a fan of Flipper. I never saw the original movies. I didn't see the 90s movie. I just never got into Flipper. And after watching the first 2 episodes of this show, which I'd never seen a single episode of, I can say without a doubt I am not into Flipper. I just don't see the point. Like, what is the why? Why would you make a show out of this? How would you make a show out of this? It felt sort of like Baywatch, like a family friendly Baywatch. I was getting made like those kind of vibes where, because I mean, how did they have ideas for 87 episodes?
They didn't.
I mean, like, because it seemed honestly, it seemed like they ran out of ideas after the first episode.
It seemed like they ran out of ideas the first half of the first episode, which again, 45 minutes. First, I noticed that the first 2 seasons aired on first run syndication, which I thought, yeah, this kind of makes sense as a first run syndication show. And then I saw the last 2 aired on the PAX network. Now, I don't know if anyone listening remembers the PAX network, but if you do, you'll know this is exactly the kind of show that aired on the PAX network.
Takes place in Florida, in the Florida Keys, at this marine biology research facility. It looks like a really nice place. This place is really nice. The main character's name is Dr. Keith Bud Ricks, played by Brian Wimmer. And I guess that he's a character from the original Flipper TV series. And then you have Dr. Pam Blondell, played by Colin Flynn, who is a naval officer who comes in to, I guess, help with the research. So I guess they figure out some kind of way to communicate with dolphins through their sonar. It's ridiculous. None of it makes any sense, but the Navy finds out and they want to like come in and like fully fund the research and stuff. And when the doctor comes in, she's got a rambunctious teenage son named Mike, played by Peyton Haas. And I love how we're introduced to the kid. He's acting like a brat in the backseat of the doctor's car, and then later, the next scene, we see him throwing rocks at a dolphin, and he goes, yes. And Bud Ricks goes, "Why are you throwing rocks at the dolphin?" He goes, "Because I didn't have a BB gun." And you're just like, "Oh, okay."
I feel the need to mention something extremely important that I've just learned. After the first season of the show, Keith Ricks, Dr. Blondell, and her son were written off the show. So only the Jessica Alba character, Jessica Alba's on the show, was still on the show for another year, and then they wrote her off the show. So by season 3, absolutely nobody from the first 2 seasons of the show were still on it. It was a completely different show. The only character who still mattered, obviously, was Flipper. Because really, Flipper is the star, I guess. But I do love that everyone else, all the humans are completely dispensable. Only Flipper is forever.
Oh my God. I kind of want to see what happens to them now. Like, what the fate of these people, these characters. I
thought that, like, I'm looking at this, and it has, the main 3 characters of the pilot. And it says, they all say season 1, 22 episodes. So there are 87 episodes. So all of the main characters of the first season are completely written off the show. Except for the Jessica Alba character, who's written off after the second season of the show.
Yeah, I am curious to know what happens. Like, did they all...
I mean, I am, but I'm also not curious enough to find out.
No, same. What if they, like, killed them off? Like, they killed them off in a fire or something. Yeah, so Jessica Alba goes by Jessica Marie Alba in this.
That's always an interesting thing when someone is.
Yeah.
Well, it's not very interesting when someone's credited by a different name if it's just the middle name, but there's very little interesting happening in this series. So a slight adjustment in how someone is being credited counts as a good observation at this point.
So this is available on Vudu. We watched this on Vudu, and it is free on there, but it's got one of those things where the ads are completely misplaced. So you'll be watching it, and it'll be like right in the middle of some big climactic action scene, and it'll just stop, and there'll be like an ad for the Scoob movie, and it'll be like 3 ads. There were 2 ads back to back for Scoob, and then it was like an ad for something else, and then back to the flipper action.
I kept getting the same ad for like a Febreze plugin.
Oh, nice.
Like, did you know there's something about, odors being trapped in rooms or something, but so you need the Febreze plugin to get the odors out, and I saw it. I guess 4 breaks a show. I saw it 8 times.
Sounds about right.
Plus a bunch of Scoob ads.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, maybe this comes into it later, but in the first 2 episodes, they never even mention Jessica Alba's her parents. Like, who is she? She just appears out of nowhere.
Apparently they gave our character another season for us to figure out who she is and what her story is, and then she was also written off.
when the Peyton Haas character first meets her, it's a really funny scene. It's pretty incredible. He's like poking around the compound that they're in, and he goes into this like abandoned. It was like an abandoned like aquatic adventure type place, and he sees Jessica Alba like sitting at the beach, and it's like this like sexy like 90s saxophone music playing, but she's wearing like just a very modest outfit, which she should be, because she's like, I don't know.
Because she was like,
she's very young, and but it was still funny. And then he like spies on her, and she sees him, and then he's like, "My name's Mike. What's your name?" And she's like, "Oh, my name's Maya." And he goes, "That's a weird name."
Yeah, what was that about?
And it's like, huh? And then she's like, "Let's go swimming." And he's like, "All right." And she just happens to have an extra pair of goggles for them to use, for him to use. I don't know. And then so the pilot was basically just set up for everything, just introducing the characters and letting us get to know, what we're in for 87 episodes. And
87 episodes.
And then
I still can't believe that.
The second episode involves so
much different than the first one.
Well, first of all, there must have been a significant amount of time between the pilot and the second episode.
Shooting a pilot and then shooting the series.
There must have been a huge span of time, because everybody looks completely different. Like Jessica Alba and Peyton Haas look like they've aged at least 5 years. And the doctor guy, all of a sudden in the first episode, has like super short hair. In the next episode, he's got like long 90s hair. So it must have been quite a while between when the pilot was shot and when it got picked up. But the second episode involves these pirates who sink this rich lawyer's boat at this very specific spot.
Yeah, the stakes of episode 2 are significantly raised from that of episode 1.
Oh yeah, I mean,
there's no hint of exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, like
what direction this is going to go in.
So there's so much peril in episode 2. Like Jessica,
it starts with an explosion.
It starts with an explosion. Peyton Haas and Jessica Alba get kidnapped. There's a guy who just straight up dies. He drowns, and we see him. We see a man drown, and then the kids.
Who is this show for?
Yeah, he drowns, and then the kids find his bloated corpse underwater.
Episode 2 contains drownings, explosions, and child abduction.
Yeah, and at one point, one of the kidnappers goes, buckle your pants, little boy. You're dropping your nerves all over the floor.
What does that mean?
I don't know. That's the thing. Like the script of the show, if you listen to it, you'll find a lot of lines like that make absolutely no sense, like whatsoever. Then there's a scene when Mike gets his foot caught in like this boat, this like sunken boat, and Flipper has to help him, I guess, and like the tide's coming in. And there's a really funny scene when Dr. Keith is trying to help him, and he's in the water too. And there's this like yacht or something that it goes by off in the distance, and he's like, "Look out, here comes a big wave." And it's like the smallest wave I've ever seen in my life. It's something else. It's got a really great soundtrack too, man. It's got the most 90s soundtrack. Sounds like a PBS, sounds like an educational PBS show from the 90s.
Oh yeah, it's got a very 1995 score. I also feel the need to note that apparently season 4, the final season, ends with Flipper almost dying, and then Flipper dies, and then I guess somehow comes back to life because he's Flipper. Actually, there's no reason for me to mention this. I started reading that before I read the end of the sentence, and I thought for a minute that the Flipper 1995 series ended with Flipper dying. But then, okay, Flipper can't. It would be kind of a bummer to end the series on Flipper's dead, so okay.
There actually wasn't too much Flipper in the 2 episodes that we watched.
There's very little Flipper in this for a show called Flipper.
I mean, the first episode, there was another dolphin. I can't remember her name. Aphrodite? Was that it?
Oh, I can't remember.
Maybe, but it wasn't Flipper. It was a different dolphin. It was
I remember the Febreze ad more than I remember most of the show.
Yeah, so Flipper, he was in it, but it wasn't until like towards the end, like when Jessica Alba and Peyton Haas first get in the water, they meet Flipper, but this is when he's like the alpha, and he's really standoffish, and he doesn't let you touch him and whatever. And then later on, Flipper saves Peyton Haas or some so then he calls him Flipper.
This is a very confusing show, I think our point here.
I would say if you're curious, only watch the pilot. Just watch the pilot, and that'll give you the groundwork for this thing. And honestly, I feel like that's all you really need. I don't think you really need anything else beyond the pilot.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have a movie adapted from not only multiple TV series, but comic books and animated shorts as well. Released on May 26, 1995, and directed by Brad Silberling, this is Casper.
Home Video and Amblin Entertainment invite you to believe your eyes.
Hi. Man, I saw a ghost.
Ghosts can't hurt you. Guess again, bone bag.
And let your imagination come to life.
Cool.
Casper, this is beautiful.
Casper, appearing on video cassette for $22.98 or less. Look for the free Pepsi mail-in offer.
Okay. Pepsi mail-in offer.
You think it's still valid?
We could try.
The free Pepsi mail-in offer?
Doesn't hurt to try. Furious that her late father only willed her his gloomy-looking mansion rather than his millions, Kerrigan Crittenden is ready to burn the place to the ground when she discovers a map to a treasure hidden in the house. But when she enters the rickety mansion to seek her claim, she is frightened away by a wicked wave of ghosts. Determined to get her hands on this hidden fortune, she hires afterlife therapist Dr. James Harvey to exorcise the ghosts from the mansion. Harvey and his daughter Kat move in, and soon Kat meets Casper, the ghost of a young boy who's, quote, the friendliest ghost you know. But not so friendly are Casper's uncles Stretch, Fatso, and Stinky, who are determined to drive all fleshies away. So what did you think about Casper?
This feels like another movie, like the Flintstones, that runs into a problem in that it seems very confused on who exactly it's trying to appeal to and how it's going to go about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It just keeps trying to split down the middle between like its approaches to this story, and so because it's trying to cut between two relatively different approaches. Again, one that's kind of like a more cynical take on it, and the other one that's more of a sincere sort of traditionalist take on it, and it doesn't do either well at all.
It's definitely one of those pretty typical live action 90s kids movies where it's a lot of slapstick, a lot of, goofy, kind of borderline gross out humor, but nothing so offensive that it wouldn't be okay for kids to see. And a lot of the jokes are bad and they don't land, but then some of the jokes are borderline inappropriate for children. I feel like there's a lot of movies that are similar to this that came out in the mid 90s, like Mouse Hunt and movies like that, where they're awful grown-ups having awful things happen to them. And I don't know. I remember I also liked this as a kid. I was, I think, maybe 11 years old when this movie came out, and I really did like it a lot. But yeah, obviously revisiting it now as an adult, I'm just like, there's nothing for me here. Like,
yeah,
I got nothing here.
There's a very limited demographic that will that this will meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly not for me. The animation, I remember as a kid being really impressed with the animation, but of course now you look at it and you're just like, oof, that does not look very good at all.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that even as a child, a lot of the jokes I didn't find to be particularly funny, like Fatso and his eating, and like when he like dresses up like the lady ghost, and Stinky when he's like burping on people, or I don't even think he's burping. Yeah, it's just his bad
barely
breath.
Jokes. They're just more like, I guess,
like sight
traits.
Gags.
Or sight gags are just throwaways. It's like there aren't a lot of jokes in this movie, but it tries to be very funny. But it doesn't actually make an attempt at creating a joke.
No. Everybody overacts in it. Maybe not Christina Ricci. Maybe she's fine in it, but Bill Pullman is just he's pretty out of control in this.
He's having a time.
Yeah. Kathy Moriarty in it, just pretty much like a Cruella de Vil type character. She's great in this. She does a really good job at playing that villain role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Eric Idle is fine too, as sort of the lackey. But
yeah,
overall, I would say, nah, not for me. Definitely not a movie for me. I do think it's funny that Casper, in and of itself, is like a sort of an inherently morbid story. It's about a dead child,
Yeah.
And they actually do, because I couldn't remember, but they actually do get into how he died. I think we could presume it was from pneumonia or something, but thought that was kind of interesting that they get into how Casper died.
Everybody wants to know the Casper origin story.
Yeah. How'd this fool die?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the funny thing is at the end when they decide to have this big party at the mansion, even though they know that there's like troublesome ghosts there, Bill Pullman's like, I can take care of these ghosts. And
because he's a therapist to the ghosts.
But see, the reason that he's a therapist to the ghosts is because his wife died and he's been trying to make contact with her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the funny thing is, like, when he first sees these ghosts, he like loses his mind, which is really funny because when he first sees them, it is like the most cartoonish reaction. It's like, like that type of reaction.
He's having a great time. He falls down a bunch of stairs.
But it makes
after seeing the ghosts.
It makes me wonder all of the previous jobs that he had. Was he just scamming them?
That's what makes you think. Like, it actually does indicate something very unsavory about this character.
Yeah.
Like, for a minute, I thought that route was going to go down was that he didn't actually believe in ghosts. But it actually seems that the character does.
He does.
Like, he had believed the whole time, just never thought he'd actually see one.
He made a career out of quote unquote communicating with the dead. So, he's scamming these poor bereaved individuals out of money. So I don't know. He doesn't seem like that great of a guy.
No. Now, the more I think about it, his initial reaction to seeing the ghost goes on for such a long time. Like, I don't think I gave enough justice to describing what happens. The character, like, runs through the hallway, trips over a carpet, grabs onto the carpet, rolls into the carpet as he falls down the stairs. They milk, like, 2 minutes of physical comedy out of him seeing a ghost for the first time.
Yep.
I don't know why. I mean, Pullman's having a great time playing it, but,
I liked in the opening scene when the two kids went into the house and saw the ghost, and they showed the Polaroid of them, and it was like not even an actual picture of the kids. It was like a drawing of the kids.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, why did you do that? Why didn't you just take a picture of the kids? Why are we doing like weird illustrations of
this movie
scared
goes
children?
Really, really, really dramatically into its own concept and its world, but only at select times. Other times it's weirdly low powered.
So you have this big Halloween ball, and wouldn't you know it, but Bill Pullman's wife shows up, and she shows up to Casper first, and she's like, "Oh, Casper, you're such a great guy, whatever." And he goes, "Are you an angel?" And she just goes, "Yep." and then and then she's like, "I'm gonna make you like a human, like alive again." And he's like, "Oh, so I have till midnight?" And she's like, "No, you're like 10 years old or whatever. You have until 10," which is like supposed to be a funny joke, but when you look at the time, it's like 9:45. So you're like, this kid has like 15 minutes to be a human and get Christina Ricci to fall in love with him or whatever. And he turns into Devon Sawa, and then they dance and kiss. And somehow this kid, who presumably died in like the early 1900s, has like the perfect 90s haircut, the long, like the part down the middle. And he turns into Devon Sawa.
An aggressively 90s haircut.
Yeah. Ultimate 90s hair. Devon Sawa coming in, sweeping Christina Ricci off her feet. And they...
Devon Sawa, another one of those actors who is like secretly it was secretly like a star of this podcast's discussions.
Yeah, I mean, he was huge. And then, they dance and they kiss and whatever, and then he turns back into a ghost. And that's
I also fundamentally don't understand, like, things about ghosts, fiction about ghosts. I don't know if this just is something about me. It sounds like it's a better deal to be a ghost than a human.
Yeah, I never really understood the rules of the ghosts in Casper, because sometimes it seems like they can like touch things and feel things in the physical world and manipulate objects, and then other times it seems like they're really disconnected from it. So
yeah, I mean,
it's a movie that doesn't necessarily follow its own rules ever.
No, it changes from minute to minute how ghosts interact with the physical world. My first idea of being a ghost is it sounds great. You can travel, like, free airfare forever, because what? What are they going to do? Charge a ghost for a seat on an airplane?
A lot of
you could just drift onto the airplane.
Like, a lot of times in ghost stories, you learn that, like, the ghost is tied to the location that it's like the house, for instance. But not in this. Like, they can just go wherever. So they're not like trapped in the house or anything. They can just leave.
It sounds amazing to be a ghost in this.
Like, why would they live there to begin with? Why would they live in this old dusty mansion when they could just live literally anywhere in the entire world?
Exactly.
But they don't even.
They could go to.
But they're ghosts.
Could they go to space?
Yeah, they're ghosts.
They could go into space. They are literally not limited. They could go. Not only could they be anywhere on the in the world. They don't have to be in this house. They could be anywhere in the universe.
Yeah. They can just sleep. They don't have to be in a domicile. They don't. It's like sleep outside. Doesn't matter. You're a ghost. Do you even need to sleep? Does it even matter?
Go to Mars.
Yeah. Travel to the ends of the universe. Jeez.
Exactly. And then they're like, this house. And I'm like, who cares about this house?
Yeah.
Casper travels through electricity at one point.
That's right. He does. I don't know about this. Apparently there was going to be a sequel. They were trying to make a sequel, but Christina Ricci wasn't interested. And I think that it did okay, but I think it underperformed as far as like what their expectations were. And I don't think it was very well received critically. So I think that the sequel just got thrown away. Oh, you know what it was? It wasn't that. It was they made some straight to video things and those underperformed. And that's why they decided not to do the sequel. That Christina Ricci was like, no, I'm not doing this. Because this is like, after this, she was doing like Buffalo 66 and stuff.
What a strange movie this is, but not even in a compelling way. It sounds like, I think the only thing we conclude is that out of all of the rules of different fictional properties of what you get to be when you're a ghost, this is maybe the best deal you could get. You can just be anywhere and take any form and travel through any means, and yet they all still choose to live in that house.
Yeah, it's all about friendship. You know, this is a story. This is a story about having friends, making friends, supporting your friends. It takes place in a town called Friendship, for God's sake.
Which is a real place, apparently.
It is so overt in its friendship stuff that it's almost sickening.
I truly think that they chose this setting purely because they shot it in Maine just because they found that there was a town called Friendship.
That wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Mm-hmm. All right, that is Casper. Can't really recommend it. And you know, some of these movies, like sometimes I'll say, you know, you probably won't like it as an adult, but maybe your kids would or something. But I hesitate to even recommend that for children because I'd be afraid that your children will really love it and want to watch it over and over again, which means you'll be watching it over and over again. And I think that there are kids movies that you can watch repeatedly as an adult and still find enjoyment in, but this is not one of those. This will drive you insane.
Oh, to be a ghost in space.
Our final film this month is based on a hit television series from 1966 that ran for an impressive 171 episodes, and then a second series in 1988, which ran for just 35 episodes. Proving to be a smash hit, the film version would go on to have 5 sequels, with the 6th coming next year. Directed by Brian De Palma and released on May 22nd, 1996. This is Mission Impossible.
You really think we can do this?
We're going to do it.
This summer, it will be impossible.
Is he serious?
Always.
To catch your breath, to keep your cool, to believe your eyes.
These guys are trained to be ghosts.
Because this summer,
You don't know what you're missing.
the impossible happens. Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, rated PG-13.
When Ethan Hunt, the leader of a crack espionage team whose perilous operation has gone awry with no explanation, discovers that a mole has penetrated the CIA, he's surprised to learn that he's the #1 suspect. To clear his name, Hunt must now ferret out the real double agent and, in the process, even the score. Adam, start us off with this discussion about Mission Impossible.
Love it.
It's a great movie.
I love this movie. Hands down.
Yeah, we love it.
Hands down, this is the best movie that we've discussed this month.
Not a really tough competition.
No, that is true, actually. In fact, looking back, it's surprising that I really did not enjoy myself with any of these movies or TV shows except for Mission Impossible, which is funny because I just revisited the entire Mission Impossible series, I think last year, I love the original Mission Impossible. Every time I get a chance to revisit this, I own all of these movies digitally, and every other year or so I'll go back and revisit this one just because I love it. I think it's an incredible film, and every time I go back and watch it, I just have a great time with it all over again.
I mean, yeah, it's so impeccably made. Like, it is such like a great piece of just really like dynamic filmmaking. Like, De Palma is just firing on all cylinders here.
This is what I'll say about that. And I think that this can be said about all of the Mission Impossible movies, is when you have a big franchise film like this, often when you get a director that has sort of a distinct style, when you inject them into a big blockbuster movie like this, often they lose that style. You know, like whenever you have one of these like kind of quirky, maybe not indie director, but like sort of a director that has a distinct voice, and you give them a Marvel movie, you're just like, you know, this is cool, and maybe I see some hints here and there that this person directed this movie, but it still feels like this big studio film that they didn't really have any kind of creative control over. But with the Mission Impossible movies, I think that there's a little bit of an exception there, where all of the directors, and if you look at all the various directors that did Mission Impossible movies, most of them have a pretty distinct style, and the movie matches that style. And for this one, I think when you compare this one to even Mission Impossible 2, the John Woo directed one, they're very different, and each of them carry that director's voice. And just comparing the first two, I think that the Mission Impossible franchise benefits a lot from Brian De Palma's unique style and voice. You know, you have those wonderful split diopter shots in there, and the really great character work with the specific zooms and angles that he uses, and the close-ups. And it feels, I mean, this is very much a Brian De Palma movie, and it fits.
All it needed was a split screen or two.
I know, right? Come on. This movie could absolutely have done that too. Like, I don't know why he didn't employ the split screen, because that would have put it over the top for me. Oh yeah, that would have been like masterpiece level if there was a split screen sequence in here. But it just the story lends itself so much to that De Palma style, you know, especially like the opening sequence when it hits the fan and they're running outside and there's like the fog, and like Jon Voight's character supposedly gets killed, and that whole sequence, it just feels got that De Palma vibe to it, and I just love it.
It's a joy. It's just a wonderful experience.
There's lots of really great twists and turns. I prefer this style of Mission Impossible movie over like the more action heavy ones, and I'm glad to say that like I think the franchise was able to really quickly course correct after Mission Impossible 2, which was, I think, on most people's lowest of, you know, worst of the bunch list. And I think that each iteration of this series has, I wouldn't say it's gotten better, but I think each one is unique in its own way, and I think that they're all pretty great. But I think that there's something special about the first one. I think it's still my favorite of the bunch, simply because I think that there are multiple scenes in this that are iconic. I mean, the scene when he is on the wire and going into the room and trying to steal the data from the computer, like that's like it's such a famous scene. I mean, it's just it's thrilling, that scene.
I was about to say that it was on the verge of like bubbling over to be like this great like canonical like classic scene, but I think it is now.
I think so.
Yeah, I was like, in terms of like ubiquity, in terms of like how famous it is, I think it is. I think it just really is just one of those like indelible scenes now.
One of the things that I thought about while watching it this time was that John Voight's character of Jim Phelps, I felt like John Voight was just playing his real life self in 2020. Like, I'm like, oh, this John Voight kind of turned into this character, didn't he?
Yeah.
He's just like this awful scumbag.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, John Voight.
Mm.
Yeah, Tom Cruise in here, just crushing it. Now, what's your familiarity with the Mission Impossible franchise? Have you seen the other ones? Some of them?
All of them? I haven't seen all of them. This is definitely the one that I'm most familiar with. Which I don't know. Is that a common take? I have no idea. I don't know. Yeah. This is the one that I could talk the most about. This is the one that I feel the most comfortable like discussing at some length because I've now seen it, multiple times. And yeah. I mean, it plays great. It still plays great. On a complete side note, I do love how extremely 90s this iteration of the self-destructing tapes are.
Oh yeah, big time. There's. I mean, we always have to mention the technology, the use of technology in these movies. I think it's like a prerequisite. If there's some computer usage, we have to mention it on this show. And there was definitely
there's a lot of computers going on here.
Yeah, there was definitely there's a scene when Ving Rhames' character is trying to jam a transfer. So like basically this woman gets the codes and she's trying to transfer these codes to or the names rather. She's trying to transfer the names to her buyer, whatever it is. And he's trying to jam the signal, and to do so, he like literally types in his computer send jamming signal. That's what he types in. Send jamming signal. Press enter.
Like, you've got to love how just completely literal minded all of the computers of like late 90s action movies are.
Oh yeah.
Like Speed 2 cruise controls, what was it like? Start now? Yes.
Yeah.
Or what was that? Time to start? Now.
Yeah, time to start now. Oh my. One of the things that I don't and I know why they do this, it's like a staple of the franchise. They do it in all the Mission Impossible movies, but I wish they didn't in the intro show clips from the movie we're about to watch. That always bothers me. Treading on spoiler territory, not quite, but it's like I'm about to watch it.
24 years old now, so it feels fine now.
But I mean, they do it with all of them though. Like all the sequels and stuff, they do the same thing, and it's just like I don't want to see it. I think the point that we're getting to now is like you're seeing those clips in just like in such like an abstract sequence that the first time you're seeing it, it doesn't really register. Like it just registers as a sequence. So the reason I say like I think it's one of those things that it strangely feels more like a spoiler the longer the movie's been around. That's why I said like 24 years on, when this movie is so familiar, then you look at it and you think, it's weird how much is in that opening sequence. But if you're seeing it for the first time, you're not really thinking that. Yeah, that could be. I still get nervous, though, anytime a new Mission Impossible comes out, because I know that intro sequence is coming and I'm about to see things that are going to happen later on. And it just, yeah. Like you, I'm probably most familiar with the first one and could probably speak to that more than the other ones, because for some reason, even though I really enjoy all of the Mission Impossible movies, after the third one, the sequels start to sort of all blend together for me. And I don't know if it's maybe because they stopped numbering them after 3 and it's just harder to differentiate. But like what happens in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, I'm just like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what happens. And then there's Mission Impossible Fallout. I mean, that Fallout is the latest one, which I remember that one more specifically, but
I temporarily forgot that Rogue Nation and Fallout were different movies.
Well, when I
They were the most recent one.
yeah, like last year when I went back and bought
I really fell off this franchise after a point.
yeah, like when I bought this franchise, I forgot all about Rogue Nation. I was like, oh, okay, there was Ghost Protocol, then Rogue Nation.
Great, isn't it?
I think they're all great. Yeah, I mean,
I've heard so many great things about Fallout, and I was like, I need to see that then, but I haven't seen all the ones in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like I'm still missing a few.
It's pretty important that you see them all, because they definitely all tie together.
I'm too I haven't seen all of the ones. I wasn't all caught up, so I don't know how many missions? How many
impossible
there are total anyway? How impossible are these missions?
How many impossible missions have I missed? And how many do I need to see to get caught up?
Yes.
Quite a few. It's impressive that this franchise started in 1996 and is still going strong today.
Mm-hmm.
There are currently 6 of them, and part 7 is slated to come out next year.
Apparently, they're just going to call it Mission Impossible 7, right? Is what the word is right now. If they went back to numbering them, that would actually be helpful for me.
Me too. They also they're also working on Mission Impossible 8, so there's going to be 2 more. Now, by the time Mission Impossible 8 starts filming or comes out, I think Tom Cruise is going to be like in his 60s. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, these movies are also somewhat famous for him doing like crazy stunts and stuff, which are really wild to see when you're watching them and you're just like, wow, Tom Cruise is a nut. Like he's really doing that. He's crazy. But yeah, I still think that the first one I think is still the best. I don't know. It's the most like espionage heavy one. Like the twists and turns and like the double crossing and stuff that's in that one. I've found that to be far more entertaining and fascinating than what happens in the other ones. Like the other ones have really cool set pieces and stuff and big action moments, but I think it was the other elements in the first one that make it so intriguing and sort of a classic.
It's just something that takes all of its twists and just plays them just so well and so enthusiastically.
Watching the set pieces now, like the train sequence, like all those, they still hold up. Like they still look great, and they're still extremely thrilling, extremely fun. Even though you know what's going to happen at this point, it's still like just super fun to watch and just really high energy.
It's such a great time.
I mean, where are you at? Have we talked about De Palma on this show before? I feel like maybe.
Perhaps.
I feel like we did. I
think we've talked about him peripherally several times.
We haven't discussed any of his films.
I don't think so.
Where are you at as far as like De Palma filmography? Are you a fan of his work?
I've seen a few. I've seen basically his most well-known movies. I haven't really gotten into a lot of his stuff. I mean, I don't know what might. Like I like him. Like I like what he's doing. I like his style enough. It feels like with De Palma, like you can't, like even though he is definitely a case of a filmmaker where even though his style has been so influential and it has just so many dividend effects, like there's no one filmmaker that could craft a genuine like De Palma clone effort.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I think that's the real sign of like someone whose like style is so singular. Like there's almost no way to fully describe a De Palma film verbally. I think that's my point. Is like there are elements to it where you almost basically need like the visual aid of actually like showing what you're talking about.
There's that really great documentary called De Palma that came out in 2015. that was directed by Noah Baumbach and Jake Paltrow, that goes through his filmography and takes a look at his style and his career. I would highly recommend checking out that documentary. It's really good.
Yeah, I kept meaning to see that, but I never have.
I'm a huge fan of his even movies like Snake Eyes. Like I'm a pretty big fan of Snake Eyes. And what was I'm trying to think of. Oh, Domino. That was really bad. He did that movie Domino that came out last year. That was for some
Wasn't
reason.
that the one that was like just on the shelf for like 5 years?
Yeah, it was the one with Nikolai Coster-Waldau. And it's just this like incredibly generic action movie. It's really, it's just really awful. But at any rate, I'm pretty much a fan of a lot of his stuff. Blowout remains one of my all-time favorites. So I really love Blowout from 1981. I think that's going to do it. Thank you ever so much for listening. You can send us feedback and suggestions to 90s@filmpulse.com or by sending us a message on Twitter or Facebook at 90spod. Remember to consider reviewing us on iTunes if you have a minute. That would be super helpful. Until next month, I hope everyone is staying in and staying healthy. For Ken Bakley, my name's Adam Patterson, and this has been Saved by the 90s.
Bye, everyone.